You are not overwhelmed by life, but by your refusal to govern your own mind. You keep reacting to thoughts, emotions, and opinions as if they are commands instead of things you can examine and choose. Everything you will hear here is built on a single Stoic demand that you learn to separate what is yours to control from what is not, and begin living by reason instead of impulse. If you are tired of being pulled around by your own reactions, then stay here and take this seriously. If this way of thinking speaks to you, subscribe and stay close to this space where discipline is not discussed, but practiced in thought and action. What follows will confront how you use your mind and how you can finally begin to govern it with clarity and steadiness that does not collapse under pressure. Number 1. Master your judgments before emotions enslave your daily actions. You lost control long before your life began falling apart. The collapse started in places nobody could see. It started in the instant you allowed every feeling to become a command. It started the moment anger became permission. Fear became prophecy. Desire became law. You say someone ruined your peace. You say circumstances broke your focus. You say pressure changed you. But look carefully at your own mind and answer honestly. What truly defeated you was not the event itself. It was your judgment about the event. It was the meaning you attached to it before reason had the chance to speak. A man insults you and your body grows hot. Your mind rushes forward like an animal released from its cage. You replay the words. You imagine revenge. Your entire day changes because another human being moved his tongue carelessly for a few seconds. Look at the weakness in this. Look at how cheaply your peace was purchased and how quickly it was stolen. You call yourself independent while living as a servant to every opinion thrown into your direction. This is not strength. This is slavery with a proud face. Your emotions are not the enemy. The enemy is your obedience to them without examination. The undisciplined mind sees a feeling and immediately kneels before it. The disciplined mind pauses and asks a harder question. Is this judgment true? Is this reaction useful? Is this response worthy of the person I claim to be? That pause is where freedom begins, not outside you, not in better circumstances, not in controlling other people. Freedom begins in the space between an event and your judgment of it. You have spent years believing your suffering comes directly from life itself. But life has less control over your inner state than you imagine. Two people experience the same insult. One loses sleep and burns with resentment for weeks. The other hears the words and remains calm. The event was identical, the judgment was different. This should shake you awake because it means your misery is not welded permanently to circumstances. It means your mind has been participating in its own suffering. Understand this clearly. Your first emotional movement may arrive without permission. Fear may appear, anger may rise, sadness may visit. But what happens next belongs to you. The judgment you attach to that feeling becomes your responsibility. The mind that never examines itself becomes a dangerous ruler. It reacts before understanding. It accuses before thinking. It panics before observing. Then it wonders why life feels chaotic. Look at your own daily behavior carefully. Someone delays a message, and immediately your mind invents rejection. A small mistake at work becomes proof that you are failing. One difficult conversation ruins an entire evening. One unexpected problem convinces you that life is against you. This is what happens when judgments are left ungoverned. The mind stops seeing reality clearly. It begins seeing only stories shaped by fear, desire, pride, and insecurity. The disciplined person does not trust every thought simply because it appears in the mind. This is one of the hardest truths you must accept. Your thoughts are not automatically wise. Many of them are trained by habit, weakness, vanity, and impulse. If you never challenge them, they will govern your life like tyrants. A single unchecked judgment can poison an entire day. A lifetime of unchecked judgments can poison an entire existence. You must begin treating your own mind like a place requiring constant supervision. Not with hatred, not with panic, but with firmness. A ruler who abandons his city invites disorder. In the same way, a person who abandons attention over their judgments invites inner chaos. You cannot afford this carelessness any longer. Life is too short to remain emotionally manipulated by every passing impression. The moment something happens, stop rushing toward reaction. Stop obeying the first impulse. Create distance. Say to yourself, this is only an event. My judgment about it will determine whether I suffer uselessly or respond wisely. This single practice can begin changing your entire existence. Most people never do this. They merge instantly with anger. They merge instantly with fear. They become indistinguishable from their emotional storms. Then they spend years blaming the world for the wreckage created by their own unexamined reactions. When your plans fail, your mind immediately calls it disaster. But examine the judgment. Is it truly disaster or wounded expectation? When someone criticizes you, your mind calls it humiliation. But examine the judgment. Is it humiliation or simply words entering your ears? When discomfort arrives, your mind calls it unbearable. But examine the judgment. Have you truly been destroyed or merely challenged? You weaken yourself every time you exaggerate what happens to you. The mind loves dramatization because dramatization protects the ego from responsibility. It is easier to call yourself broken than undisciplined, easier to call life unfair than admit your own reactions remain immature. But no improvement begins until honesty enters the room. The person capable of governing themselves must first stop lying to themselves. You are disturbed not because life is difficult, but because your judgments are undisciplined. Difficulty is part of existence. Delay, loss, insult, sickness, uncertainty, and disappointment belong to every human life. Expecting exemption from these realities is itself irrational. The problem is not that hardship exists. The problem is that you keep demanding reality obey your preferences. Look carefully at how much suffering comes from this demand. You want people to behave according to your expectations. You want the future to unfold according to your plans. You want comfort, permanence, certainty, and praise. Then reality refuses your demands, and your emotions revolt like spoilt rulers denied obedience. This is why your peace remains fragile. You are trying to control what was never yours to command. Your judgments must return to what actually belongs to you. Your choices belong to you. Your character belongs to you. Your ability to respond with reason belongs to you. External events do not belong to you. Other people do not belong to you. Outcomes do not belong to you. Once this becomes clear, your mind begins recovering from years of unnecessary struggle. Imagine waking tomorrow with a new discipline. Every impression that enters your mind is questioned before accepted. Every emotional reaction is examined before obeyed. Someone insults you, and instead of immediate rage, you observe your own response like a judge examining evidence. You ask whether anger will improve your character or weaken it. You ask whether this event truly harms your soul or only irritates your pride. In that moment, you stop being a slave to impulse. You become capable of self-command. This does not mean becoming cold or lifeless. It means becoming governed instead of chaotic. A disciplined mind still feels emotion, but no longer surrenders authority to emotion. Fear may knock at the door, but reason decides whether it enters. Anger may appear, but wisdom decides whether it speaks. Desire may arise, but character decides whether it acts. Right now, your life is shaped less by events than by interpretations. This should give you both discomfort and hope. Discomfort because you must finally face your responsibility. Hope because your inner life can change beginning today, not through wishful thinking, not through motivational excitement, through disciplined examination, repeated daily until wise judgment becomes habit. Begin every morning with preparation. Before entering the day, remind yourself that difficult people exist, delays exist, frustrations exist, mistakes exist, loss exists. Why are you shocked every time life behaves according to its nature? Your anger often comes from surprise, but the prepared mind wastes no energy demanding that reality become different. It meets events steadily because it expected them from the beginning. Tell yourself clearly each morning that your goal is not comfort but character, not approval but reason, not emotional indulgence but self-governance. This changes how you enter the day. You stop asking whether events please you and start asking whether your responses remain honorable. Then practice attention throughout the day. Attention is one of the greatest forms of inner discipline. Most people move through life half conscious of their own minds. Their reactions happen automatically. Their habits govern them invisibly. But you must become a watcher of your own judgments. Catch yourself exaggerating. Catch yourself assuming. Catch yourself turning inconvenience into catastrophe. A delayed train is not catastrophe. Criticism is not destruction. Temporary discomfort is not suffering unless your judgment transforms it into suffering. Your mind adds unnecessary weight to reality constantly. Notice this. Correct it. Refuse dramatization. There will be moments when your emotions rise strongly despite your effort. Good. This is where training begins. Anyone can speak calmly about discipline when life feels easy. The true test arrives when insult, pressure, fear, or temptation appear directly before you. In those moments, remember this. You are not required to react immediately. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to examine. You are allowed to choose reason over impulse. That pause may last only seconds, but it contains the difference between wisdom and regret. Entire lives collapse because people never learned to interrupt themselves. One moment of uncontrolled anger destroys relationships. One moment of fear destroys opportunity. One moment of emotional weakness creates consequences lasting years. Yet all of it could have been prevented by the discipline of examined judgment. You say you want peace. Then stop feeding your mind interpretations that manufacture conflict. You say you want strength. Then stop surrendering authority to temporary feelings. You say you want freedom. Then stop allowing external events to dictate your inner condition. There is another uncomfortable truth you must face. Many of your emotional reactions are secretly protecting your ego. Anger often hides wounded pride. Anxiety often hides attachment to control. Resentment often hides entitlement. Self-pity often hides avoidance of responsibility. If you never examine the roots of your judgments, you will continue calling weakness by respectable names. The disciplined life requires ruthless honesty, not cruelty toward yourself, but clarity about yourself. You cannot govern a mind you refuse to study. Sit quietly at the end of each day and review your reactions honestly. Where did emotion overpower reason? Where did pride distort judgment? Where did fear speak louder than wisdom? This nightly examination is not punishment, it is training. A person improves by observing themselves truthfully, not by avoiding themselves comfortably. You should also practice voluntary silence when emotions surge, not permanent silence. Disciplined silence. When anger rises, do not immediately speak. Words spoken under emotional control usually become weapons thrown carelessly. Delay reaction until reason returns. Many problems disappear when the mind is given time to cool before speaking. You should also train yourself to describe events plainly instead of emotionally. Instead of saying this ruined everything, say this was inconvenient. Instead of saying I cannot handle this, say this is difficult but manageable. Language shapes judgment, judgment shapes emotion, emotion shapes action. Learn to speak about reality accurately instead of dramatically. Understand something essential. Nobody can give you inner stability while your judgments remain undisciplined. Not wealth, not relationships, not status, not success. If your mind reacts wildly to every event, then comfort itself becomes fragile because fear of losing comfort will govern you constantly. Mental strength is not built by controlling the world around you. It is built by governing the world within you. This is why some people remain calm in hardship, while others collapse in convenience. The difference is not circumstances. The difference is trained judgment. You have another day today to begin this work. Not tomorrow. Not when life becomes easier. The mind strengthens through use, not intention. Every difficult interaction becomes practice. Every disappointment becomes practice. Every temptation becomes practice. Life itself becomes the training ground for reason. When insulted, practice restraint. When frustrated, practice patience. When anxious, practice perspective. When tempted, practice self-command. Stop viewing these moments as interruptions to your growth. They are your growth. You are shaping your character constantly, whether consciously or unconsciously. Every reaction becomes repetition. Every repetition becomes habit. Every habit becomes character. If you continue reacting blindly, your character will be shaped by impulse. If you begin examining your judgments, your character will be shaped by reason. And remember this carefully. No person reaches perfect self-mastery quickly. You will fail some days. You will react emotionally. You will lose attention. You will speak unwisely. But failure itself is not defeat unless you refuse examination afterward. Return to discipline immediately. Learn from the reaction instead of defending it. The purpose is not emotional numbness. The purpose is alignment with reason. A stable mind sees events clearly without distortion from panic, vanity, resentment, or craving. Such a mind becomes difficult to shake because its peace no longer depends on external obedience. One day your life will end. This is not tragedy. This is reality. The tragedy is reaching that final moment without ever having governed yourself. The tragedy is spending years blaming circumstances while remaining a stranger to your own mind. The tragedy is living entirely through reaction while never discovering the strength of deliberate judgment. So begin now. Watch your mind closely today. Listen to the stories it tells. Question the interpretations it creates. Refuse immediate obedience to emotional impulse. Separate events from judgments. Separate discomfort from catastrophe. Separate wounded pride from genuine harm. You are capable of more discipline than you currently demand from yourself. But capability without practice remains useless. Train your judgments daily until reason becomes stronger than impulse. Train your attention daily until awareness interrupts emotional slavery. Train your character daily until external events lose the power to govern your inner condition. Then you will understand something few people ever truly learn. Peace was never hidden in controlling the world. Peace was hidden in mastering the judgments through which you see it. Number 2. Accept every hardship without complaint and strengthen your character. Pain entered your life, and you immediately called it injustice. Difficulty appeared, and you treated it like an interruption to the life you believed you deserved. The moment discomfort arrived, your mind began searching for someone to blame. You blamed people, you blamed circumstances, you blamed fate. But while your attention remained fixed on accusation, your character remained weak. Hardship was standing before you, offering discipline and endurance, while you stood there demanding comfort instead. Look honestly at your own habits during difficult moments. A plan fails, and your spirit collapses with it. Someone disappoints you, and bitterness begins spreading through your thoughts like poison through water. Your body grows tired, and your mind starts negotiating with weakness. You call ordinary struggles unbearable because you have trained yourself to expect ease instead of growth. Yet life was never designed to obey your preferences. The world does not reorganize itself around your comfort. The person who refuses this truth spends years angry at reality itself. Complaint feels natural to the undisciplined mind because complaint creates the illusion of innocence. The moment you complain, you position yourself as a victim of life, rather than a participant within it. You speak as if hardship entered your existence by mistake. But difficulty is not a mistake. It is part of the structure of human life. Illness arrives, people betray trust, bodies age, plans collapse, wealth disappears, loved ones die. None of this is unusual. None of this violates the order of existence. What destroys people is not hardship itself, but the refusal to accept hardship without resistance. You have been taught to measure a good day by how comfortable it feels. This has weakened you more than you realize. Comfort is unstable. It shifts constantly. If your peace depends upon conditions remaining pleasant, then your peace is already fragile. A single inconvenience becomes enough to disturb your entire inner state. A delayed response changes your mood. A difficult conversation ruins your concentration. A small failure poisons your confidence. This is not strength. This is dependence disguised as sensitivity. The disciplined person does not ask life to become easier. They ask themselves to become steadier. This changes everything. Hardship stops being treated as punishment and begins being treated as training. Every obstacle becomes an opportunity to examine character. Every discomfort becomes a chance to strengthen self-command. Every difficult moment reveals whether reason governs your life or whether your emotions still hold authority over you. Think carefully about what complaint actually does. It does not remove the hardship. It does not improve your character. It does not solve the problem. Complaint simply adds bitterness to difficulty. It is suffering layered on top of suffering. The event itself may be painful, but your resistance multiplies the pain unnecessarily. A person who constantly complains trains the mind toward weakness, because the mind becomes accustomed to reacting instead of enduring. Endurance is not silence filled with resentment. True endurance is calm acceptance of reality without surrendering virtue. It is the ability to remain rational while circumstances become difficult. It is the refusal to abandon discipline because life stopped being pleasant. Anyone can behave calmly when conditions are favorable. Character reveals itself when life removes convenience. Observe how quickly your principles disappear during discomfort. You promise patience until someone tests your pride. You promise discipline until temptation appears. You promise calmness until events refuse your expectations. Then suddenly your values vanish and impulse takes command. This is why hardship matters. Hardship exposes the difference between imagined character and actual character. You say you want strength, yet avoid every situation that could develop it. You seek certainty instead of courage, ease instead of resilience, approval instead of integrity, but the soul does not become disciplined through avoidance. A person grows stronger by meeting difficulty consciously and refusing to become bitter in the process. When something painful happens, stop asking why this is happening to you. Ask instead what this moment demands from your character. Does it demand patience? Does it demand honesty? Does it demand restraint? Does it demand courage? The event itself is not your true concern. Your response is. Hardship becomes destructive only when it pulls you away from reason and virtue. A difficult coworker is not merely an irritation. That person becomes an opportunity to practice composure. Financial pressure becomes an opportunity to practice simplicity and self-control. Physical exhaustion becomes an opportunity to observe whether your discipline depends entirely on comfort. Loss becomes an opportunity to remember that nothing external was ever permanently yours. This is a hard truth for the attached mind to accept. You suffer deeply because you keep trying to possess what was always temporary. You cling to outcomes, you cling to people, you cling to routines. Then when life changes direction, you experience reality itself as betrayal. But nothing external was promised to you forever. The disciplined mind appreciates what exists without demanding permanence from it. You waste enormous energy resisting facts you cannot change. The past cannot be corrected through anger. Other people cannot be controlled through frustration. The future cannot be secured through anxiety. Yet your mind exhausts itself fighting these truths daily. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is seeing reality clearly so reason can finally begin acting properly. The moment hardship enters your life, your first task is to separate what belongs to you from what does not. The event may not belong to you. The outcome may not belong to you. Another person's behavior may not belong to you. But your judgment belongs to you. Your choices belong to you. Your conduct belongs to you. This separation restores inner stability because it returns your attention to the only place where freedom actually exists. You should begin practicing this immediately. When difficulty appears, pause before reacting emotionally. Say to yourself, this situation may challenge my body, my plans, or my comfort, but it cannot force me to become irrational unless I permit it. This is how the disciplined mind regains authority over itself, not through denial of pain, but through refusal to become mentally enslaved by pain. There will be days when exhaustion speaks loudly inside you. The body feels heavy, motivation disappears, frustration grows. During those moments, your mind will search desperately for escape. It will tell you to quit your discipline temporarily. It will tell you to indulge weakness because you have suffered enough. But observe what happens every time you obey this voice. Your self-respect decreases, your endurance weakens, your mind learns that discomfort is enough to make you abandon yourself. Strength develops when you continue acting according to reason despite discomfort. Not recklessly, not harshly, but steadily. You wake up and complete your responsibilities even when emotion argues against it. You remain measured even when others behave poorly. You continue speaking honestly even when dishonesty appears easier. You remain disciplined when nobody is watching. This is how character hardens quietly over time. You must also examine the hidden pride within complaint. Complaint often says more about expectation than suffering. You believed life owed you uninterrupted ease. You believed people owed you constant fairness. You believed effort guaranteed outcomes. Then reality contradicted those assumptions and resentment appeared. But existence does not operate according to personal entitlement. The sooner you accept this, the calmer your mind becomes. The disciplined person understands that hardship is unavoidable, but unnecessary emotional chaos is optional. Pain may visit every human being. Misfortune may arrive without warning, but panic, bitterness, self-pity, and rage are responses shaped by judgment. The mind can learn another way. Begin your mornings by preparing yourself mentally for difficulty. Do not wake expecting perfect cooperation from life. Expect delays. Expect misunderstandings. Expect inconvenience. Expect moments where your patience will be tested. This preparation changes the quality of your reactions because the mind stops treating hardship like an unexpected insult. Then, throughout the day, practice voluntary restraint in small ways. Eat with moderation even when excess is available. Remain calm during minor frustrations. Delay unnecessary pleasures occasionally. Walk away from pointless arguments. Endure small discomforts without immediately trying to escape them. These practices train the mind to stop demanding constant gratification. A person unable to endure small discomforts will collapse under larger ones, but the mind trained through deliberate restraint develops quiet confidence. It learns that discomfort is survivable. It learns that urges do not require obedience. It learns that peace can remain even when circumstances become difficult. You should also observe how often you rehearse suffering before it even arrives. One uncertain situation enters your life and your mind immediately creates disaster after disaster. You imagine humiliation, failure, abandonment, catastrophe. Then your body reacts to imagined events as though they are already real. This habit drains your strength long before reality demands anything from you. Return your attention to the present moment instead. Ask yourself, what is actually happening now? Not what might happen next month, not what could happen eventually. What is required of your character right now? Usually the answer is far simpler than the fearful stories created by your imagination. When hardship becomes severe, do not ask whether you enjoy carrying it. Ask whether you can carry it honorably. This question restores dignity during suffering. You may not control the burden itself, but you still control whether bitterness, corruption, cowardice, or self-pity enters your conduct. There is deep freedom in this understanding. Once you stop expecting life to protect you from hardship, your fear of hardship decreases. You stop negotiating constantly with reality. You stop demanding guarantees before acting courageously. You stop treating discomfort as evidence that something has gone wrong. The disciplined life requires repeated return to reason. You will fail sometimes. You will complain. You will resist reality emotionally. You will lose perspective. But when this happens, do not waste energy condemning yourself dramatically. Correct yourself calmly. Return to discipline immediately. The purpose is progress in character, not performance for approval. At the end of each day, examine yourself honestly. Ask where complaint entered your speech. Ask where resentment governed your thoughts. Ask where discomfort caused you to abandon reason. Then ask how you could meet similar moments with greater steadiness tomorrow. This nightly examination slowly sharpens awareness because the mind begins recognizing its own patterns more clearly. You should notice something important as this practice deepens. Hardship itself becomes less frightening, not because pain disappears, but because your relationship to pain changes. You begin seeing difficulty as temporary and manageable rather than catastrophic. You realize your character can remain intact through circumstances that once controlled you completely. This is the strength many people search for in status, wealth, distraction, and external validation. Yet none of those things create inner endurance. Real strength appears when the mind stops arguing with reality and starts training itself within reality. A storm does not ask whether you feel prepared before arriving. Illness does not wait for convenience. Loss does not seek permission. Your life will contain difficulty whether you resent it or not. So the question is no longer whether hardship will come. The question is who you will become when it does. Will you become reactive and bitter? Will you abandon discipline the moment life feels unfair? Will you spend your days complaining about conditions beyond your control? Or will you become steady? Will you meet hardship with clear judgment? Will you preserve integrity even during pain? Will you use difficulty to strengthen the very character that comfort kept weak? Every day gives you opportunities to answer these questions through action rather than words. A difficult morning, an unfair criticism, a delayed reward, an unexpected obstacle. These are not interruptions to your training. They are the training itself. Your mind can become stronger than its habits. Your character can become steadier than circumstances, but only if you stop fleeing discomfort and begin using it properly. Hardship was never the enemy. Your refusal to face it consciously was. So stand upright before your difficulties now. Stop asking life for softer conditions. Ask yourself for firmer character. Accept what arrives without theatrical complaint. Meet each challenge with discipline instead of resentment. Let hardship teach you patience. Let uncertainty teach you humility. Let discomfort teach you endurance. Let loss teach you detachment. Let every difficult moment remind you that peace does not belong to the person whose life is easiest. Peace belongs to the person whose mind remains governed by reason no matter what life places before them. Number 3. Discipline your thoughts before chaos controls your inner peace. Your mind has been speaking to you all day without discipline, and you have mistaken every voice inside you for truth. One fearful thought appears, and you immediately obey it. One memory returns, and your peace disappears. One imagined future enters your attention, and your body tightens as though disaster has already arrived. You call this normal because you have lived this way for years, but look carefully at what is happening inside you. Your thoughts are ruling your life without examination. Your inner world has become crowded with impulses, judgments, fears, desires, and assumptions that move freely without challenge. Then you wonder why your spirit feels restless, even in quiet moments. Chaos does not begin outside you. It begins when the mind loses the ability to distinguish between appearance and reality. A thought enters your awareness, and instead of examining it calmly, you become absorbed by it completely. The thought says you are failing, and you believe it. The thought says someone secretly despises you, and you accept it. The thought says the future will collapse, and your emotions immediately surrender to fear. This is how inner disorder spreads, not through events themselves, but through ungoverned thinking. You must understand something difficult about the human mind. It naturally drifts toward confusion when left untrained. It repeats old fears. It exaggerates danger. It invents insults where none exist. It attaches itself to outcomes it cannot control. If you do not establish discipline over your thoughts, your peace will always remain temporary, because your mind itself will become the source of disturbance. Notice how quickly your attention abandons the present moment. You sit quietly for a few seconds, and immediately your thoughts begin pulling you into imagined conversations, future disasters, past humiliations, and endless rehearsals of events beyond your control. Your body may be standing in one place while your mind wanders through 10 different fears at once. This scattered attention weakens your judgment because the mind loses contact with reality itself. The disciplined person learns to observe thoughts without kneeling before them. This is one of the most important forms of inner training. The thought appears, and instead of immediately accepting it, the rational mind asks whether the thought deserves belief. Is it accurate? Is it useful? Is it within my control? Does it strengthen character or weaken it? These questions interrupt the automatic obedience that keeps people trapped in unnecessary suffering. You have suffered not only from events, but from the stories your mind continuously builds around those events. One mistake becomes proof of worthlessness. One rejection becomes evidence that you are unwanted everywhere. One uncertainty becomes a vision of complete ruin. Yet none of these conclusions arrive through reason. They arrive through unchecked interpretation. The mind creates emotional storms from assumptions, then lives inside those storms as though they were reality. Look honestly at how often your thoughts move ahead of facts. Someone speaks briefly, and your mind invents hidden hostility. A challenge appears, and your thoughts predict defeat before action has even begun. Silence from another person becomes abandonment. Delay becomes failure. Difficulty becomes hopelessness. The mind, addicted to assumption, creates suffering faster than reality ever could. Peace cannot exist inside a mind that constantly argues with reality. You keep demanding certainty from an uncertain world. You keep demanding permanence from temporary conditions. Then your thoughts revolt every time life behaves according to its nature. Instead of accepting uncertainty as part of existence, your mind treats it like an emergency. This is why your thoughts feel exhausting. They are constantly trying to control what was never yours to command. Begin seeing your thoughts as visitors rather than rulers. Not every thought deserves your trust. Some thoughts are shaped by fear, some by vanity, some by resentment, some by long-practiced insecurity. If you automatically believe every mental impression, you become vulnerable to endless inner instability. The disciplined mind develops the strength to pause before agreement. The first practice you must begin is morning preparation of the mind. Before speaking to anyone, before touching distractions, before entering the noise of the day, sit quietly with yourself. Remind your mind what actually belongs to you. Your judgments belong to you. Your actions belong to you. Your use of reason belongs to you. Other people's opinions do not belong to you. Future outcomes do not belong to you. Random events do not belong to you. This daily reminder protects the mind from wandering into useless emotional entanglement. Then throughout the day, practice attention with seriousness. Watch your thoughts the way a guard watches a city gate. Do not allow every impression to enter freely. The moment a destructive thought appears, examine it carefully. Ask whether it reflects reality or emotional habit. Ask whether it leads toward wisdom or toward disturbance. This single discipline can begin restoring order to a chaotic inner life. You should also train yourself to separate facts from interpretation. This practice changes the quality of your entire experience. The fact may be that someone disagreed with you. Your interpretation may be that you are disrespected and unworthy. The fact may be that a plan failed. Your interpretation may be that your future is ruined. The fact may be uncertainty. Your interpretation may become panic. Most suffering grows inside interpretation, not reality. A disciplined mind speaks about events plainly. It refuses exaggeration. It refuses dramatization. It refuses emotional distortion. Instead of saying everything is falling apart, say this situation is difficult. Instead of saying I cannot endure this, say this requires patience and clear judgment. Language influences thought, and thought influences emotional stability. A careless tongue often reveals an undisciplined mind. Another danger you must confront is mental indulgence. You allow certain thoughts to repeat because part of you enjoys the emotional identity attached to them. Resentment makes you feel morally superior. Self-pity protects you from responsibility. Anxiety creates the illusion of preparation, but these patterns quietly weaken your ability to live rationally. A person attached to emotional chaos begins defending the very thoughts causing suffering. You must become more severe with yourself in this area. Not cruel, but honest. Stop feeding thoughts that damage your peace. Stop rehearsing imaginary arguments repeatedly. Stop returning to old insults for emotional stimulation. Stop revisiting fears that produce paralysis instead of action. The mind becomes stronger when it learns that not every thought deserves attention. One of the clearest signs of inner disorder is constant mental distraction. You avoid silence because silence forces confrontation with yourself, so you fill every empty moment with noise, conversation, entertainment, or stimulation. But distraction does not heal the mind. It only delays self-examination. Eventually, you must sit alone with your own thoughts and determine whether they are serving reason or destroying it. The undisciplined mind also confuses emotional intensity with truth. A thought feels powerful, so you assume it must be accurate. But strong emotion proves nothing. Fear can feel convincing while being completely irrational. Anger can feel justified while being deeply destructive. Desire can feel urgent while leading directly toward regret. This is why reason must stand above emotion rather than beneath it. When strong thoughts arise, do not immediately act. Delay judgment. Let reason examine the situation before behavior follows emotion. Many ruined relationships, many wasted opportunities, and many moments of shame began with a thought accepted too quickly. A disciplined pause protects character. You should also practice limiting unnecessary mental speculation. Your mind constantly seeks to travel into futures that do not exist yet. You imagine failure before effort. You imagine rejection before conversation. You imagine catastrophe before evidence. This habit drains energy needed for present action. The future should be approached with preparation, not obsession. Ask yourself honestly how many hours of your life have been lost to thoughts that never became reality. How much peace has been sacrificed to imagine disasters? How many opportunities were abandoned because fear spoke loudly before reason had the chance to respond? An undisciplined imagination becomes a source of voluntary suffering. Bring your attention back repeatedly to what can actually be done now. Not next year, not after perfect certainty arrives. Now, what action belongs to you in this moment? What judgment requires correction? What responsibility requires attention? What virtue can be practiced today? This return to the present restores clarity because reality exists only here. At night, you must examine your mind carefully. Do not end the day unconsciously. Sit with yourself honestly and review your thoughts. Where did fear control judgment? Where did resentment dominate attention? Where did desire distort reason? Where did unnecessary mental noise steal peace from your day? This practice trains awareness because repeated observation slowly reveals the patterns governing your life. You will notice that many thoughts lose power once exposed to examination. The mind thrives on automatic reaction, but when reason calmly questions an impulse, the illusion weakens. A fear examined carefully often reveals exaggeration. An insult examined carefully often reveals wounded pride rather than true harm. A craving examined carefully often reveals emptiness rather than necessity. The disciplined person understands that inner peace is not created by controlling circumstances. Inner peace is created by governing interpretation. Two people can face the same difficulty while experiencing entirely different inner conditions because one mind remains ordered while the other becomes consumed by emotional confusion. This training requires consistency because mental habits formed over years will not disappear in a single afternoon. Your thoughts have traveled certain paths repeatedly until those paths became automatic. Fear repeats itself. Complaint repeats itself. Desire repeats itself, but repetition can also build discipline. Every moment of examined judgment strengthens the rational mind. Do not expect perfection from yourself immediately. There will still be moments when anxiety enters forcefully or anger speaks before wisdom, but improvement begins the instant you stop identifying completely with every thought passing through your mind. You are not required to become whatever your latest emotion suggests. You possess the ability to step back internally and examine your own thinking. This ability is one of the greatest powers available to a human being. An animal follows impulse automatically. A disciplined person studies impulse before choosing whether to obey it. That difference determines whether life becomes governed by reason or by chaos. Guard your mind carefully because your thoughts shape the quality of your existence. A mind filled with bitterness will discover reasons to remain bitter everywhere. A mind trained toward gratitude and clarity will remain steadier during difficulty. A mind addicted to fear will turn uncertainty into torment. A mind disciplined through reason will meet uncertainty with patience. Every thought you encourage becomes easier to repeat tomorrow. This is why attention matters so deeply. You are training your inner life constantly, whether consciously or unconsciously. Each fearful rehearsal strengthens fear. Each rational correction strengthens wisdom. Each indulgence in resentment deepens resentment. Each return to clear judgment strengthens peace. You do not need to eliminate every difficult thought to become mentally disciplined. You need to stop surrendering authority to them. Thoughts may appear without invitation, but agreement remains your responsibility. The rational mind retains the power to refuse destructive conclusions, even during emotional difficulty. Life will continue bringing uncertainty, pressure, loss, temptation, and disappointment. No discipline can remove these realities completely, but an ordered mind no longer becomes internally destroyed by every external movement. It remains grounded because it has learned the difference between events and interpretation. So begin today with seriousness. Observe your thoughts instead of drowning inside them. Refuse emotional exaggeration. Refuse unnecessary speculation. Refuse mental habits that poison your peace. Return your attention to reason repeatedly until clear judgment becomes stronger than impulse. Your inner world does not become peaceful by accident. Peace requires training. Peace requires examination. Peace requires the courage to confront your own thinking honestly without excuses. Disorder entered your life through neglected thoughts. Order returns through disciplined awareness. Number 4. Reject empty pleasures that weaken your mind and purpose. You call it enjoyment when your mind weakens itself willingly. You call it relaxation when your attention dissolves into distraction. You call it reward when your discipline is quietly traded for stimulation that leaves nothing behind except fatigue and regret. Look closely at your own daily patterns, and you will see how often you abandon strength for convenience without even noticing the moment it happens. A small urge appears and you obey it. A craving rises and you justify it. A moment of boredom arrives and you escape it immediately. This is how a life loses direction while still appearing functional on the surface. Pleasure is not your enemy. Blind obedience to pleasure is. The mind that cannot refuse itself becomes fragile because it learns to depend on constant comfort. Every time you surrender to unnecessary indulgence, you weaken your ability to endure difficulty. Every time you choose ease over purpose, you reduce your tolerance for effort. Over time, you begin to require softness in order to function at all. Then even simple responsibilities feel heavy because your mind has been trained to avoid resistance rather than build strength through it. You already know this truth, but you avoid looking directly at it. You feel it after long periods of distraction. You feel it when you realize the day has passed and nothing meaningful was shaped within it. You feel it when your attention has been scattered across entertainment that demanded nothing from you yet left you emptier than before. Empty pleasure is not harmless. It quietly steals the energy required for discipline and replaces it with restlessness disguised as satisfaction. Your suffering is not caused by the existence of pleasure. It is caused by the absence of restraint. The undisciplined mind confuses stimulation with fulfillment. It believes intensity of sensation equals value of experience, so it chases constant input, constant novelty, constant noise. Yet the more it consumes, the less it is able to remain steady when silence arrives. A mind addicted to stimulation becomes incapable of peace because peace requires stillness, and stillness begins to feel uncomfortable. You must observe how quickly your attention moves toward things that offer no lasting benefit. You reach for distractions before even acknowledging boredom. You escape discomfort before understanding its message. You seek pleasure not because it strengthens you, but because it prevents you from facing yourself. This avoidance is subtle but powerful. It keeps the mind busy enough to avoid self-examination while quietly eroding inner discipline. The disciplined person does not reject pleasure entirely. They question its effect. They ask whether it strengthens clarity or clouds it, whether it supports purpose or weakens it, whether it leaves the mind more capable or more dependent. Pleasure that aligns with reason is acceptable. Pleasure that erodes self-command must be refused without negotiation. This distinction must become firm within you, or your impulses will continue deciding your life for you. Look honestly at how many of your pleasures leave you worse than before. Hours spent consuming content that teaches nothing and builds nothing. Conversations that revolve around gossip instead of truth. Habits that produce immediate relief but long-term emptiness. None of these appear dangerous in isolation, yet together they shape a mind that is easily distracted and difficult to direct. You do not lose your discipline in a single dramatic collapse. You lose it through repeated small agreements with weakness. Each time you choose comfort over effort, you strengthen the habit of avoidance. Each time you choose stimulation over reflection, you weaken attention. Each time you choose indulgence over restraint, you reduce your capacity for self-governance. Over time, these small choices accumulate into a character that struggles with consistency. You must begin to see pleasure as a test rather than a reward. Every moment of temptation reveals whether you are governed by reason or by impulse. The question is never whether pleasure exists, but whether it commands you. A free mind can encounter pleasure without being captured by it. A dependent mind seeks pleasure as if it were necessary for survival. The first discipline you must practice is awareness of consumption. Notice what enters your mind throughout the day. Notice what you watch without purpose. Notice what you scroll without intention. Notice what you consume simply to avoid stillness. Then ask what these actions are producing in you. Are they building clarity or scattering attention? Are they strengthening purpose or dissolving it into fragments of distraction? The morning is where this discipline begins. Before the day fills your attention, set a clear intention that your mind will not be governed by unnecessary indulgence. Decide in advance what deserves your time and what does not. Without this decision, the day will decide for you, and it will favor the easiest path rather than the most meaningful one. Throughout the day, practice interruption. When you reach for distraction, pause for a moment before acting. That pause is where discipline lives. In that space, you regain the ability to choose rather than react. Ask yourself whether this action serves your character or only your craving. Most impulses weaken when examined closely. They rely on speed and habit. They lose power when exposed to reason. You should also observe the emotional cycle that follows indulgence. Immediate satisfaction quickly turns into dullness. Attention becomes scattered. Motivation decreases. The mind that was briefly entertained becomes less willing to engage with meaningful effort. This is how empty pleasure quietly undermines purpose. It does not destroy it directly. It weakens it gradually until discipline feels unusually heavy. A strong mind recognizes this pattern early and refuses to reinforce it. It understands that every indulgence carries a cost in attention and clarity. Not all pleasure is equal. Some forms enrich the mind and body, others drain them. The undisciplined mind ignores this difference. The disciplined mind studies it carefully. You must also confront the hidden belief that life owes you constant enjoyment. This expectation creates unnecessary disappointment. Life was never structured to provide continuous stimulation. It includes boredom, repetition, effort, and silence. When you reject these natural states, you create internal resistance that turns ordinary life into discomfort. Instead of asking how to avoid discomfort, begin asking what kind of discomfort builds strength. There is discomfort in discipline and there is discomfort in indulgence. One leads to mastery of self, the other leads to dependence. You experience discomfort either way. The only question is whether it will weaken or strengthen you. Train yourself to delay unnecessary pleasure, not to eliminate joy, but to remove compulsion. When an urge appears, do not obey it instantly. Wait, observe it, let it lose its urgency. Many desires disappear when not immediately fed. This simple delay restores authority to reason. You should also practice voluntary simplicity. Choose moments where you deliberately do without what is convenient. Walk away from constant stimulation for periods of time. Allow your mind to experience quiet without filling it. This is not deprivation, it is training. It restores sensitivity to what is real rather than what is artificial. A person who cannot be alone with their own mind will always depend on external stimulation for stability. This dependence makes inner peace impossible. True strength appears when silence no longer feels threatening, when absence of distraction feels natural rather than uncomfortable, when the mind can remain steady without constant input. Examine your evenings carefully. This is where discipline often dissolves. After the demands of the day, the mind seeks escape. It turns toward effortless consumption, yet this is the moment where reflection should occur. Instead of ending the day in distraction, end it in examination. Review how attention was used. Identify where impulses were followed without question. Recognize where purpose was weakened by unnecessary indulgence. This reflection is not punishment, it is correction. A disciplined life requires awareness of failure, not avoidance of it. Only what is seen clearly can be improved. Only what is acknowledged honestly can be changed. You will notice that as discipline grows, your relationship with pleasure changes naturally. You no longer crave everything available. You begin to value clarity more than stimulation. You begin to prefer meaningful effort over passive consumption. This shift does not come from force. It comes from understanding that unnecessary pleasure offers nothing lasting. The goal is not emotional emptiness. The goal is mental freedom. A mind governed by impulse is never free because it must obey whatever desire appears strongest in the moment. A mind governed by reason is free because it chooses according to principle rather than craving. There will still be moments of weakness. You will sometimes give in to distraction. You will sometimes choose ease over discipline. But what matters is whether you return to awareness afterward. Do not justify the lapse. Do not build stories around it. Simply observe it and correct it. Growth lies in recognition and return. Every time you refuse unnecessary pleasure, you strengthen your ability to govern yourself. Every time you choose purpose over distraction, you reinforce clarity. Every time you pause before indulgence, you reclaim authority over your own attention. These small victories accumulate quietly until discipline becomes your natural state rather than a forced effort. At the end of this reflection, return to a simple truth. Your mind becomes what it repeatedly practices. If it practices indulgence, it becomes dependent. If it practices restraint, it becomes strong. If it practices distraction, it becomes scattered. If it practices focus, it becomes steady. No external force is responsible for the weakness of your attention. No circumstance controls your choices in moments of impulse. You always retain the ability to pause and choose differently. That ability is the foundation of inner strength. So begin now with seriousness. Observe your pleasures without blindness. Refuse those that weaken your purpose. Accept only those that support clarity and discipline. Let your mind learn again how to stand firm without constant stimulation. In that firmness you will find a strength that cannot be taken from you because it was built through your own deliberate choice. Number 5. Confront painful truths and destroy comforting self-deception immediately. You are not suffering because life hides the truth from you. You are suffering because you keep hiding the truth from yourself. Every time reality becomes uncomfortable, your mind quietly builds a softer version of it. You soften failure into almost success. You soften avoidance into waiting for the right time. You soften weakness into temporary fatigue. You soften fear into careful thinking. And with each softened lie, you lose contact with the only thing that can actually free you, which is reality seen without distortion. Self-deception does not arrive loudly. It arrives gently through explanations that make you feel better without making you better. You tell yourself you are improving while repeating the same patterns. You tell yourself you are disciplined while breaking small promises daily. You tell yourself you are honest while avoiding the one conversation you know you should have with yourself. The mind prefers comfort over clarity, so it builds stories that protect comfort even when those stories destroy growth. Look closely at your own internal language. Notice how quickly you excuse what you should examine. A mistake becomes just this once. A delay becomes tomorrow will be better. A lack of effort becomes circumstances were not right. You are constantly negotiating with your own responsibility. This negotiation is the source of stagnation. A mind that refuses to confront truth will always remain dependent on illusion. There is a moment in every life where truth appears clearly and the mind immediately tries to escape it. You already know those moments. You feel them when you recognize a habit is harming you but continue anyway. You feel them when you understand a relationship is draining your character but avoid acting. You feel them when you know what must be done but delay it because acceptance would demand change. In these moments you are not confused, you are resisting clarity. Painful truth is not your enemy, your resistance to it is. Truth does not harm the mind, it strengthens it. What harms you is the distance you place between yourself and what is real. The longer you avoid truth, the more fragile your decisions become because they are built on denial rather than understanding. A life guided by avoidance eventually collapses under the weight of what it refused to face. You must understand how deeply self-deception shapes your daily behavior. It is present in how you interpret failure. Instead of seeing it as feedback, you turn it into identity. It is present in how you interpret discomfort. Instead of seeing it as training, you turn it into injustice. It is present in how you interpret responsibility. Instead of seeing it as power, you turn it into burden. These interpretations are not reality. They are protective stories designed to avoid accountability. The disciplined mind does not allow stories to replace facts. It separates what is happening from what it wishes was happening. This separation is uncomfortable at first because it removes emotional cushioning, but it is the only path to real strength. A person cannot improve what they refuse to see clearly. A person cannot correct behavior that is constantly disguised through justification. You have likely noticed that avoidance creates temporary relief, but long-term weakness. When you avoid a difficult truth, you feel better for a moment, but worse over time. The issue does not disappear, it accumulates. The mind grows heavier with unaddressed reality. Eventually, the burden becomes too large to ignore and forces confrontation through crisis instead of choice. This is how self-deception always ends, not in peace but in pressure. The work of a disciplined life begins with willingness to face what is unpleasant without immediately escaping into comfort. This requires inner stability, not emotional toughness in the crude sense, but rational courage. The courage to look at your own behavior without softening it. The courage to admit where you have not lived according to your own standards. The courage to accept that improvement requires change, not explanation. Start your mornings with direct honesty. Before engaging with the world, examine yourself without excuses. Ask what you avoided yesterday that you knew required attention. Ask where you acted against your own judgment. Ask where you prioritized comfort over integrity. Do not answer these questions lightly. The purpose is not emotional reflection. The purpose is precise recognition of reality. Throughout the day, practice immediate correction of rationalizations. The moment you notice yourself justifying avoidance, stop the thought and examine it. Ask whether the justification is based on truth or convenience. Most justifications collapse when inspected carefully. They exist to protect behavior, not to reveal truth. Once you see this pattern clearly, its influence begins to weaken. You should also train yourself to notice the emotional signals of self-deception. There is a subtle discomfort that appears when you are avoiding truth. It often feels like irritation, distraction, or sudden urge to change focus. Many people misinterpret this as tiredness or stress. In reality, it is the mind attempting to escape clarity. When you feel this, do not run from it. Stay with it long enough to understand what it is pointing toward. One of the most powerful Stoic practices is the removal of emotional decoration from facts. Instead of saying, "This is too hard for me," say, "This is difficult and I have not yet applied sufficient discipline." Instead of saying, "This is not my fault," say, "This is the outcome of my choices or my lack of action." This language removes distortion and restores responsibility. Responsibility is uncomfortable, but it is the foundation of transformation. You must also confront the way self-deception hides inside identity. You begin to define yourself in ways that excuse behavior instead of correcting it. You say, "I am just like this," when describing weakness. You say, "This is who I am," when avoiding change. But identity is not a fixed excuse. It is a set of habits that can be examined and revised. When you treat identity as unchangeable, you give permission for stagnation. A rational life requires continuous revision of self-perception. You are not required to remain who you have been, but you are required to see who you are clearly at this moment. Only then can change be intentional rather than accidental. The mind that refuses honest self-observation becomes trapped in repetition because it never interrupts its own patterns. There will be resistance when you begin this practice. The mind does not surrender its comforting narratives easily. It will argue, it will distract, it will search for alternative explanations, it will try to preserve emotional comfort at the expense of clarity. You must expect this resistance and continue anyway. Discipline is not the absence of resistance, it is the refusal to obey resistance. When painful truth appears, do not treat it as an attack on your worth. Treat it as information about your current condition. A mistake is not identity, it is data. A weakness is not definition, it is a training point. A failure is not final judgment. It is feedback on where discipline must be strengthened. Only a mind free from self-deception can interpret reality in this constructive way. Each evening, examine where you avoided truth during the day. Identify moments where you knew better but acted otherwise. Do not judge yourself emotionally. Observe yourself factually. The goal is awareness, not shame. Shame continues self-deception by making truth feel unsafe. Awareness removes illusion without adding distortion. You will notice that as honesty increases, unnecessary suffering decreases. Much of what you call emotional pain is created by resistance to truth rather than truth itself. When you stop resisting reality, internal conflict reduces. When you stop explaining away behavior, clarity increases. When you stop hiding from yourself, energy returns because it is no longer spent maintaining illusions. There is a deep freedom in confronting truth directly. It removes the constant pressure of internal contradiction. You no longer need to remember what you told yourself yesterday to avoid discomfort. You no longer need to maintain narratives that protect ego. You no longer need to manage appearances within your own mind. You simply see clearly and act accordingly. The disciplined person understands that truth is not always pleasant, but it is always stabilizing. Self-deception may feel gentle at first, but it creates instability over time because it disconnects you from reality. A mind disconnected from reality cannot act effectively within it. It reacts instead of responds. It avoids instead of corrects. It drifts instead of directs. You must choose which difficulty you will accept. The difficulty of facing truth or the difficulty of living in confusion. Both involve discomfort. One leads to strength, the other leads to repeated failure disguised as explanation. Begin now with seriousness. Remove the habit of softening reality. Speak to yourself with precision instead of comfort. Observe your behavior without distortion. Interrupt excuses before they form into belief. Return repeatedly to what is actually true rather than what feels easier to believe. A life governed by truth becomes simpler. Not easier in sensation but clearer in direction. The mind no longer fights itself. Decisions become cleaner. Action becomes direct. Inner conflict decreases because illusion is no longer being maintained. Self-deception dissolves the moment you refuse to cooperate with it. Truth does not require force, it requires willingness, and willingness begins when you decide that clarity matters more than comfort, and that your future character is worth more than your present excuses. Number 6. Govern your reactions because events never control your soul. You are not controlled by events. You are controlled by what you allow events to awaken inside you. This is the truth you keep avoiding because it removes the comfort of blaming the outside world. You say people ruin your mood. You say circumstances steal your peace. You say unexpected situations force you into anger, fear, or frustration. But if events truly controlled your soul, then every person would react the same way to the same situation, yet they do not. One person remains steady while another collapses. One person responds with clarity while another reacts with chaos. The difference is not in the event. The difference is in the governed or ungoverned mind. Your reactions are not automatic truths. They are trained responses that you repeat until they feel natural. Every time you react without examination, you reinforce a pattern that weakens your ability to choose. You begin to believe that anger is necessary, that frustration is justified, that fear is unavoidable, but none of these states are imposed on you by reality itself. They are created by your interpretation of reality, and interpretation belongs to you. Look at your daily life with honesty. Someone interrupts your plan and your inner state immediately tightens. A message arrives that does not meet your expectation, and your mood shifts without permission. A stranger speaks carelessly and your peace dissolves within seconds. You believe this proves that life is unstable, but what it actually proves is that your reactions are unstable. Events are neutral until your mind assigns meaning to them. The untrained mind confuses impact with control. It believes that because something is felt strongly, it must be important enough to dictate behavior. But intensity of feeling is not evidence of truth. It is only evidence of emotional activation. A storm inside you does not mean the world has changed. It only means your inner judgment has moved without discipline. You must learn to place a boundary between what happens and how you respond. That boundary is where your freedom lives. Without it, every external event becomes a command. With it, every external event becomes information. One path leads to reaction, the other leads to choice. Most people live as if there is no space between stimulus and response. They believe they are the response. This belief is the root of unnecessary suffering. Begin to observe how quickly you surrender this space. A thought appears, and you act on it instantly. An emotion rises, and you obey it immediately. A judgment forms, and you treat it as final truth without questioning it. This speed is the problem, not events themselves, but the absence of pause. A mind that never pauses never becomes free. The disciplined life begins when you refuse to react immediately, not through suppression but through examination. When something disturbs you, stop for a moment and ask what exactly is happening. Then ask what judgment you are adding to it. The event may be small, but your interpretation may be large. That difference determines your suffering. You are not required to approve every reaction your mind produces. Many reactions are inherited from habit rather than reason. You were not born reacting with anger to every inconvenience. That response was learned through repetition. Anything learned can be unlearned through awareness, but only if you stop treating reaction as identity. Your soul remains untouched by external events. What is disturbed is not your inner core, but your judgment about the event. This distinction is crucial. If you believe your peace is fragile and dependent on circumstances, you will constantly feel threatened. But if you understand that only your interpretation creates disturbance, you regain authority over your inner life. You must start seeing reactions as choices happening too quickly rather than forces happening against your will. Between event and response, there is a brief space. In that space, reason can enter. Most people ignore this space and therefore live as if they have no control. But control exists precisely there. The moment you recognize this, you begin to reclaim responsibility for your inner state. Practice slowing down your internal responses throughout the day. When irritation appears, do not immediately express it. When fear appears, do not immediately follow it. When desire appears, do not immediately obey it. Instead, observe it as a signal that requires evaluation. Ask whether this reaction aligns with reason or only with impulse. This questioning weakens automatic behavior and strengthens deliberate action. You should also train yourself to separate facts from emotional labeling. A situation occurs and your mind instantly assigns emotional meaning to it. You call it unfair, you call it threatening, you call it humiliating. But these are interpretations layered on top of neutral events. By stripping away interpretation, you see what is actually happening. Only then can reason act effectively. Much of your suffering comes from reacting to interpretations as if they were facts. Someone's tone feels dismissive, so you assume disrespect. A delay feels personal, so you assume rejection. A challenge feels overwhelming, so you assume failure. None of these assumptions are guaranteed truths. They are projections created by a reactive mind. The disciplined mind interrogates these projections before accepting them. It does not rush into emotional certainty. It asks what evidence supports this reaction. It asks what alternative explanations exist. It asks whether responding emotionally improves the situation or only multiplies disturbance. This questioning creates distance between impulse and action. You must also become aware of how often you attempt to control external events through emotional reaction. You become angry as if anger will change the past. You become anxious as if anxiety will secure the future. You become frustrated as if frustration will correct others. But emotional reaction rarely changes anything outside you. It only changes your internal condition. When you accept that events do not obey emotion, you stop wasting energy trying to influence reality through reaction. Instead, you direct energy toward what is actually under your control, which is judgment, choice, and action. This shift marks the beginning of genuine inner stability. Each morning, you should prepare your mind for this discipline. Remind yourself that today will contain events you do not choose. People will act without consulting your expectations. Situations will unfold without your permission. Your task is not to control these events, but to govern your response to them. This preparation prevents surprise from turning into emotional collapse. During the day, practice returning repeatedly to awareness of your reactions. When you feel disturbance, notice it immediately rather than after it has already grown. Name it internally as a reaction rather than reality. This simple recognition creates space. In that space, reason can re-enter and adjust your response. You will notice that many reactions lose strength when observed calmly. Anger depends on immediate expression. Fear depends on imagined certainty. Frustration depends on resistance. When these states are observed instead of obeyed, they begin to lose authority. They still appear, but they no longer govern behavior. You must also examine how attachment to outcomes fuels reactive behavior. When you believe things must go a certain way, you become emotionally unstable whenever reality differs. But reality does not guarantee alignment with your preferences. The more rigid your expectations, the more frequent your reactions. Flexibility of expectation leads to stability of response. At the end of each day, review moments where reactions controlled you instead of reason. Do not judge yourself emotionally. Observe patterns clearly. Where did you react too quickly? Where did interpretation override fact? Where did emotion replace judgment? This reflection trains awareness for the next day. As this discipline deepens, you will begin to notice a separation forming between events and your inner world. Events continue to occur, but they no longer dictate your emotional state as easily. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to observe instead of absorb. You begin to choose instead of obey. This is not emotional suppression. It is governance. A governed mind still feels, but it does not surrender authority to feeling. It still experiences disturbance, but it does not become defined by disturbance. It still encounters difficulty, but it does not lose clarity because of difficulty. You are capable of this transformation because your reactions are not fixed laws. They are habits shaped over time, and habits can be reshaped through deliberate practice. Every moment of awareness weakens automatic reaction. Every moment of reflection strengthens rational response. No external event can reach the core of your inner life unless you allow interpretation to open the door. That door is your judgment. Guard it carefully. Do not let every impression pass through unexamined. The strength of your inner life depends not on avoiding events, but on governing responses. Begin now with seriousness. Observe your reactions without delay. Separate events from interpretation. Pause before emotional obedience. Return to reason repeatedly throughout the day. In doing so, you reclaim the one power that has always belonged to you. The power to remain steady regardless of what life presents. Number 7. End your dependence on praise and reclaim inner freedom. You keep handing pieces of your freedom to strangers without noticing it. A glance of approval lifts your mood. A lack of recognition lowers your confidence. A compliment makes you feel capable. Silence from others makes you question your worth. You have allowed the opinions of people who do not govern your life to quietly govern your mind. This is why your inner state shifts so easily. It is not events that disturb you most. It is your dependence on how those events are perceived by others. Praise feels harmless, even pleasant, but it carries a hidden cost. Every time you rely on it to feel steady, you weaken your ability to stand on your own judgment. You begin to measure yourself through external reflection rather than internal clarity. When praise arrives, you feel elevated. When it disappears, you feel diminished. This cycle is not strength. It is emotional dependence disguised as social awareness. Look carefully at your daily behavior. You hesitate before acting because you imagine how others will respond. You adjust your words to secure approval. You avoid decisions that might invite criticism even when those decisions are right. You celebrate validation as if it were proof of value. You fear disapproval as if it were proof of failure. In doing so, you hand authority over your life to minds that are not responsible for your character. The disciplined mind does not ask whether it will be praised. It asks whether it is acting rightly. This difference determines whether you live freely or reactively. A person dependent on praise is never truly acting from principle. They are always acting under observation. Their choices are shaped by imagined audiences. Their behavior becomes performance rather than integrity. You must understand how fragile this dependence makes you. When your self-worth is tied to external approval, you become vulnerable to every shift in opinion. A moment of criticism can undo hours of confidence. A lack of recognition can erase long effort. A single negative judgment can outweigh many positive actions. This instability is not caused by others. It is created by your decision to outsource your value. Freedom begins when you stop asking the world to confirm your worth. Your worth does not increase through praise, and it does not decrease through silence. Both are external reactions that reveal nothing about the quality of your character. Yet you have trained yourself to respond emotionally to them as if they were final verdicts. This training must be reversed. The first step is to observe how often you seek approval before acting. Notice the subtle internal negotiation that occurs before decisions. You imagine reactions, you predict approval or disapproval, you adjust your behavior accordingly. This is not rational decision-making. It is dependency on imagined judgment. Once you see this clearly, you can begin separating action from audience. Before any action, ask yourself whether it aligns with reason or whether it is shaped by desire for recognition. If the action is correct, then external approval is irrelevant. If the action is incorrect, then external approval becomes meaningless. The only standard that matters is whether your conduct strengthens or weakens your character. Everything else is noise. You should also examine how praise affects your identity. When praised, you begin to inflate your self-perception. You believe you are more capable than you have proven. When criticized, you collapse inward and doubt abilities you have clearly demonstrated. Both reactions show the same problem. Your identity is being shaped externally instead of being governed internally. A stable mind does not expand with praise or shrink with criticism. It remains anchored in self-knowledge rather than public opinion. It recognizes effort without exaggeration and acknowledges mistakes without self-destruction. This balance is impossible when external validation controls emotional stability. You must practice withholding emotional response to praise and criticism. When praise arrives, do not immediately accept it as truth. Observe it without attachment. When criticism arrives, do not immediately accept it as verdict. Examine it without emotional reaction. Both are simply external impressions, not definitions of your worth. Begin your mornings by establishing internal authority before entering the world. Remind yourself that your task today is not to gain approval, but to act according to reason. Your responsibility is to choose integrity over impression. This early reminder sets the foundation for independence from external judgment. Throughout the day, watch how often you modify behavior to influence perception. You may find yourself speaking differently depending on who is present. You may notice hesitation in expressing honest thoughts when they might not be received favorably. You may detect subtle avoidance of actions that could lead to criticism. These patterns reveal where dependence still exists. Each time you notice this, pause internally. Ask whether you are about to act from principle or from desire for acceptance. This pause restores clarity. It interrupts automatic behavior shaped by social conditioning. It gives reason time to reassert authority over impulse. You must also confront the emotional volatility created by comparison. When you measure yourself against others, you become unstable by default. Someone else's success becomes your insecurity. Someone else's recognition becomes your self-doubt. Someone else's approval becomes your validation. This constant comparison destroys inner freedom because it places your identity in a position you cannot control. The disciplined mind removes comparison from judgment. It focuses instead on personal conduct. What matters is whether you are acting with integrity today, not whether someone else is receiving more recognition. External differences do not define internal worth. Yet comparison makes you forget this repeatedly unless consciously corrected. You will notice that dependence on praise often hides insecurity. The desire to be seen positively comes from uncertainty about self-worth, but seeking external confirmation cannot heal internal instability. It only delays confrontation with it. True confidence does not come from being seen positively. It comes from knowing that your actions align with reason regardless of how they are perceived. To strengthen this, begin practicing actions that are correct even when unnoticed. Do what is right without announcing it. Complete your responsibilities without seeking acknowledgement. Make decisions based on principle even when they will not be appreciated. This quiet discipline builds internal validation that does not rely on external feedback. Over time, you will see that the mind becomes less reactive to approval or disapproval. Praise no longer elevates you. Criticism no longer destabilizes you. Both are recognized as external events that do not define inner character. This is not emotional indifference. It is emotional independence grounded in reason. Each evening, examine moments where you sought validation. Identify where you adjusted behavior for approval. Identify where fear of judgment influenced action. Do not judge yourself harshly. Simply observe the pattern clearly. Awareness itself weakens dependence because what is seen clearly loses unconscious power. You should also reflect on the cost of living for approval. Every time you prioritize how you will be perceived over what is right, you abandon a portion of your freedom. You begin living for reactions instead of principles. You become responsive to opinion rather than anchored in judgment. This creates a life shaped externally rather than directed internally. Freedom is not achieved by receiving universal approval. That is impossible. Freedom is achieved by no longer needing approval to act correctly. When approval becomes unnecessary for confidence, the mind becomes stable regardless of external response. This stability is the foundation of genuine strength. You must recognize that most people are also governed by the same dependence. They are reacting to how they are seen while you are reacting to how you are seen. This creates a society of minds constantly adjusting themselves to imagined audiences rather than acting from reason. Breaking this pattern requires conscious refusal to participate in it. There will be discomfort when you begin this practice. The mind accustomed to validation will initially feel exposed when approval is removed from decision-making, but this discomfort is temporary. It is the resistance of habit being replaced by discipline. If you remain steady through it, the dependence weakens. Gradually, you will notice a shift. Actions begin to feel cleaner because they are no longer filtered through fear of judgment. Decisions become clearer because they are not distorted by expectation of praise. Inner life becomes quieter because it is no longer constantly evaluating imagined reactions from others. This is what reclaiming inner freedom looks like. Not isolation from people, but independence from their approval. You can still listen to others, you can still learn from criticism, you can still appreciate encouragement, but none of these determine your worth or dictate your direction. Your worth is defined by the quality of your reasoning and the integrity of your actions. Nothing external can add to it or take away from it. Once this becomes clear, praise loses its power to control you. And in that moment you begin to stand where few people ever stand. Not dependent on applause, not crushed by silence, but governed by your own disciplined understanding of what is right. Number 8. Train yourself daily through discomfort and deliberate self-restraint. You do not become strong by imagining strength. You become strong by meeting what you naturally avoid and refusing to turn away. Every time discomfort appears in your life, you reveal something about yourself, not about the world, about your discipline, about your willingness to govern impulse instead of obeying it. Most people spend their entire lives arranging circumstances to avoid discomfort, and then wonder why their character remains fragile when circumstances refuse to cooperate. Your daily behavior already shows where your limits are. You choose the easier option when effort is required. You postpone tasks that demand focus. You shift away from situations that test patience. You escape moments of silence by filling them with distraction. You avoid physical strain when comfort is available. None of this is unusual, but it reveals a pattern that quietly weakens your capacity to endure anything meaningful. A mind trained only in comfort becomes confused when life inevitably introduces resistance. You have been taught to interpret discomfort as something wrong, something to eliminate immediately, something to escape as quickly as possible. But this interpretation is precisely what keeps you weak. Discomfort is not a signal of harm. It is often a signal of growth being resisted. The body grows through strain, the mind strengthens through pressure. Character develops through deliberate friction against ease. When you avoid discomfort, you are not avoiding pain. You are avoiding training. You are avoiding the very conditions that would make you capable of remaining steady when life becomes difficult. You call it self-care, but often it is self-avoidance. You call it balance, but often it is dependence on ease. And over time, this pattern makes even minor challenges feel heavy because you have not practiced meeting resistance directly. Self-restraint is not punishment, it is governance. A mind without restraint is ruled by impulse, and impulse always chooses immediate relief over long-term strength. Every unexamined urge becomes a command. Every fleeting desire becomes action. Every moment of boredom becomes escape. This is how a person loses authority over themselves without realizing it. The body obeys instinct while reason remains silent. You must learn to interrupt this automatic obedience. When discomfort appears, do not immediately move away from it. Pause and observe what is actually happening. The situation is not harming your character, it is revealing it. Your reaction to discomfort shows how much control reason actually holds in your life. If impulse always wins, then discipline has not yet taken root. Begin to see discomfort as a training partner rather than an enemy. It shows you where your limits currently are, not where they must remain. Every moment of restraint strengthens your ability to choose deliberately instead of reacting automatically. This is the foundation of inner stability, not avoiding difficulty but meeting it consciously without surrendering to impulse. Your mind resists this because it prefers familiarity. It prefers ease. It prefers predictable pleasure over uncertain growth. But nothing valuable in character development comes from constant familiarity. Growth requires stepping into conditions where your usual reactions are challenged. Without this, you remain exactly as you are, repeating the same patterns while expecting different strength. You already know where your discipline collapses. It collapses in small moments that seem insignificant, choosing distraction instead of focus, choosing comfort instead of effort, choosing delay instead of action, choosing emotional reaction instead of rational response. These choices appear harmless individually, but together they form the structure of your character. A structure built on avoidance cannot support strength. Deliberate self-restraint begins when you stop obeying every impulse immediately. You create a pause between desire and action. In that pause, reason can enter. Without that pause, you are simply reacting like an unexamined reflex. The pause is where freedom exists. Without it, you are driven. With it, you are governed. Start with simple acts of voluntary discomfort, not for punishment, but for training. Do things slightly harder than necessary. Delay gratification when there is no need for immediacy. Continue effort when mild resistance appears. Stay present in discomfort long enough to realize it does not control you. Each of these moments teaches your mind that ease is not required for stability. You should also observe how quickly discomfort influences your thinking. When something becomes slightly difficult, your mind often begins constructing reasons to stop. It calls the task unnecessary. It calls the timing wrong. It calls your energy insufficient. These justifications appear rapidly because they are protecting the habit of avoidance. If you accept them without examination, you reinforce weakness as a default response. The disciplined mind questions these justifications immediately. It asks whether stopping is truly necessary or simply easier. It asks whether discomfort is harm or just resistance to effort. It asks whether continuing would build character or whether quitting would simply preserve comfort. These questions slow down impulse and allow reason to regain authority. Your mornings are where this training should begin. Before the day shapes your reactions, you set intention toward discipline. You decide in advance that discomfort will not be treated as a command to stop, but as an opportunity to strengthen endurance. Without this intention, the day will pull you toward ease automatically. During the day, practice staying present when discomfort appears. Do not rush to eliminate it. Observe it carefully. Notice that it rises and falls without destroying you. Most discomfort loses power when not immediately escaped. It intensifies in anticipation, not in reality. The mind exaggerates it because it expects obedience from you. You should also separate necessary discomfort from unnecessary avoidance. Some discomfort is part of meaningful action. Work, effort, responsibility, and discipline all contain resistance. Avoiding them weakens you. Other discomfort comes from harmful impulses that offer short-term relief and long-term loss. Learning the difference requires honest observation of consequences, not immediate emotional reaction. Self-restraint also reveals hidden dependencies. When you cannot sit in silence without distraction, you are dependent on stimulation. When you cannot feel hunger or delay eating without urgency, you are dependent on immediate satisfaction. When you cannot endure fatigue without collapsing into avoidance, you are dependent on comfort. These dependencies are not moral failures. They are training gaps that must be corrected through repetition. The practice is simple but not easy. You willingly remain in situations that require effort without escaping them prematurely. You allow discomfort to exist without immediately trying to remove it. You act according to reason even when impulse suggests otherwise. Each repetition weakens automatic dependency and strengthens deliberate control. Evening reflection is essential in this process. Review moments where discomfort controlled your choices. Identify where you stopped early, where you avoided effort, where you chose ease without necessity. This is not for guilt, it is for awareness. Awareness allows correction. Without awareness, the same patterns repeat unconsciously. Over time, something shifts quietly. Discomfort no longer feels like a threat. It becomes familiar, not enjoyable but manageable. The mind stops treating it as an emergency and begins treating it as information. This is the beginning of resilience, not the absence of difficulty, but the absence of panic in the presence of difficulty. You begin to notice that your confidence no longer depends on how comfortable you feel. It depends on how disciplined you remain when comfort is absent. This is a deeper form of stability. It cannot be shaken by external conditions because it was built through repeated internal choice. There will be moments when you still choose comfort over discipline. This is expected. The goal is not immediate perfection. The goal is gradual strengthening of your ability to choose differently next time. Each time you recognize a lapse without justifying it, you weaken the pattern of avoidance. Eventually, you realize that most limits you once believed were fixed were actually habits of avoidance reinforced over time. When those habits are challenged through deliberate restraint, they begin to lose authority. What remains is a mind capable of enduring far more than it previously assumed. At the core of this practice is a simple truth. You cannot control whether discomfort appears in your life. You can control whether it governs your actions. You cannot remove resistance from existence. You can only decide whether resistance will weaken or strengthen you. So begin now with seriousness. Stop treating comfort as a requirement for action. Stop treating discomfort as a signal to retreat. Begin using restraint as training rather than avoidance. Meet small difficulties deliberately. Stay present when impulse demands escape. Let reason guide action even when ease is available. In doing this consistently, you reclaim authority over yourself, not through force against the world, but through discipline within it. And in that discipline, you discover a form of strength that no external condition can take away because it was built through your own deliberate choice to remain steady when comfort asked you to abandon it. Number 9. Remember death constantly and act with urgency and virtue. You move through your days as if time belongs to you, as if there will always be another moment to correct what you ignored today, as if delay has no consequence, as if life is an endless extension of unfinished intentions. This assumption is the quiet source of your hesitation, your procrastination, and your half-lived decisions. You are not failing because you lack knowledge. You are failing because you act as though you have unlimited time to become who you claim you want to be. Death is not an abstract idea placed at the end of life. It is the constant condition under which every moment exists. Each breath you take is not guaranteed to repeat. Each opportunity you postpone may never return. Each conversation you avoid may remain forever unresolved. Yet you behave as if the present moment is only a draft version of life, rather than the only real expression of it. You are not disturbed by death itself. You are disturbed by the illusion that you have control over time. This illusion allows you to postpone discipline. It allows you to delay responsibility. It allows you to believe that transformation can always happen later. But later is not a possession you hold. It is a possibility that may never arrive. Look honestly at how often you waste time on things that do not align with your values. You consume hours without intention. You postpone meaningful work for comfort. You avoid difficult conversations that require courage. You delay decisions that require clarity. And each delay is justified by the belief that you will act when conditions feel more favorable. But conditions rarely become perfect, and life does not wait for readiness. Remembering death is not about fear. It is about clarity. It removes the illusion that time is abundant enough to be wasted without consequence. When you truly acknowledge that your existence is finite, urgency becomes natural rather than forced. Not panic-driven urgency, but deliberate seriousness. The seriousness of a mind that understands every moment is already complete and cannot be repeated. You must begin to observe how your awareness of mortality weakens your excuses. When you imagine that you may not have another chance, hesitation loses its strength. When you accept that delay is not harmless, procrastination becomes irrational. When you see that time is not a resource you control but a condition you are passing through, your priorities begin to shift toward what is essential. Most of your suffering does not come from death itself, but from living without awareness of it. You act as though life is infinite in practice, even though you know it is finite in principle. This contradiction creates laziness in thought and hesitation in action. You avoid urgency because urgency feels uncomfortable. But comfort is not the measure of truth. The disciplined mind does not wait for external reminders of mortality. It carries awareness of finitude internally. This awareness does not diminish life. It sharpens it. It removes trivial concerns from importance. It strips away unnecessary distraction. It forces attention onto what actually matters in the limited time available. You should begin each morning with the recognition that the day is not guaranteed beyond its current moment, not as fear but as orientation. This single recognition changes the quality of attention. It makes distraction less acceptable. It makes avoidance less tolerable. It makes intention more necessary. Ask yourself what kind of person you would be if this day were the final opportunity to act according to your values, not as an emotional exercise, but as a practical reordering of priorities. What would you stop delaying? What would you stop tolerating? What would you begin immediately without hesitation? The answers to these questions reveal where your life is misaligned with your awareness of time. Throughout the day, observe how easily you fall into delay. Notice how often you tell yourself there will be more time later. Notice how frequently you treat tasks as optional when they are actually essential. This pattern reveals that your sense of urgency is not aligned with reality. It is shaped by comfort rather than truth. When urgency is absent, distraction becomes dominant. The mind fills time with whatever is easiest, rather than what is most meaningful. This creates a life that feels busy but not directed. Activity replaces purpose. Motion replaces progress, and days pass without alignment between intention and action. To correct this, you must train yourself to act when clarity appears rather than when comfort permits. If you know what is right, begin immediately. If you recognize what must be done, do not wait for motivation. Motivation is unreliable because it depends on feeling. Urgency grounded in mortality does not depend on feeling. It depends on understanding. You must also examine how attachment to future outcomes delays present action. You wait for conditions to improve before beginning. You wait for confidence before acting. You wait for certainty before committing. But certainty is rarely available in advance. Action is what produces clarity, not what follows it. Death awareness removes the illusion that you can afford endless preparation. It forces you into honest engagement with the present. You are no longer preparing for life as if it exists elsewhere. You are participating in it now, or not at all. The practice of remembering death should not create anxiety. If it does, you are focusing on loss rather than on responsibility. The correct focus is not what will end, but what must be done while there is still time. Mortality is not a reason for fear, it is a reason for precision. You will notice that when you hold awareness of finitude, your tolerance for meaningless activity decreases. You become less willing to waste attention, less willing to engage in unnecessary conflict, less willing to postpone important action. This is not emotional intensity. It is rational prioritization. Evening reflection becomes sharper when viewed through this lens. Instead of asking what was done, you ask what was done that truly mattered. You evaluate whether your actions aligned with the reality that time is limited. You observe where you acted with seriousness and where you drifted into distraction. This reflection builds awareness without emotional distortion. Over time, you begin to see that urgency is not rushing. It is precision. It is the removal of unnecessary delay between understanding and action. A person aware of mortality does not waste energy on trivial hesitation. They act in accordance with what is necessary now because now is the only guaranteed moment. You must also confront the discomfort that arises when you fully accept impermanence. The mind resists this awareness because it removes illusions of endless opportunity. But without removing this illusion, complacency persists. Complacency is not peace. It is delay disguised as calm. True peace arises when you align action with reality. Reality includes the fact that life is limited. When you accept this without resistance, your decisions become clearer. You stop acting as if time is an unlimited buffer and start acting as if each moment carries real weight. The disciplined life does not depend on dramatic awareness of death. It depends on steady recognition that time is always being spent and never returned. This recognition should guide how you speak, how you act, how you prioritize, and how you treat responsibility. You are not asked to live in fear of ending. You are asked to live in alignment with the truth that every ending is already approaching. This alignment produces urgency without panic and seriousness without despair. Each moment you delay what matters, you act as if time is not real. Each moment you act with clarity, you acknowledge reality as it is. The difference between these two choices determines whether your life is shaped by avoidance or by intention. Begin now with seriousness. Stop postponing what you already know must be done. Reduce delay between understanding and action. Treat each day as complete and non-repeatable. Let urgency arise naturally from awareness of finitude rather than from external pressure. In doing so, you begin to live with a clarity that removes unnecessary hesitation. You act not because you feel ready, but because time does not wait for readiness. And in that understanding, you reclaim a life governed by virtue rather than postponement, shaped by reason rather than delay, and directed by awareness rather than illusion. Number 10. Serve reason completely and silence every irrational, destructive impulse. You are not confused because reason is weak. You are confused because reason is constantly interrupted. Every day your mind produces impulses that feel urgent, emotions that feel absolute, and reactions that feel justified, and instead of examining them, you obey them. This is how a rational being slowly becomes a reactive one, not through ignorance, but through neglect of the only faculty that can govern the rest. Reason is not something you occasionally use when life is calm. It is the governing principle that must remain in command even when everything inside you demands otherwise. Yet you often reverse this order. Desire speaks first. Fear speaks loudly. Anger speaks quickly. And reason arrives late, if it arrives at all, after decisions have already been made. A mind ruled this way is not free. It is carried by impulses it does not question. Look at how many of your actions are not chosen but followed. A thought appears and you assume it is true. A feeling rises and you assume it must be acted upon. A sudden urge forms and you assume delay is impossible. You rarely pause to ask whether any of these internal movements deserve authority. You treat them as commands rather than signals. This is the root of unnecessary suffering. To serve reason completely means to stop granting automatic authority to whatever arises within you. Not every thought deserves expression. Not every emotion deserves obedience. Not every impulse deserves action. Most internal movements are temporary and unstable. Reason is the only faculty capable of evaluating them before they become behavior. You must begin to see the difference between what is produced in the mind and what is endorsed by the mind. A thought appearing is not the same as a thought accepted. A desire arising is not the same as a desire followed. A reaction forming is not the same as a reaction executed. Freedom exists in that distinction. Without it, you become identical with every passing impulse. Your suffering increases each time you fail to make this distinction. You act on irritation and create conflict you later regret. You act on fear and avoid opportunities that would have strengthened you. You act on desire without examination and create consequences you did not intend. Then you look at life and assume external forces are responsible. But the pattern begins inside you, not outside you. Reason must become the standard against which every impulse is measured. Not comfort, not intensity, not immediacy, only reason. Ask whether this thought aligns with what is true. Ask whether this emotion is based on reality or interpretation. Ask whether this impulse leads towards stability or fragmentation. If it does not pass this examination, it does not deserve action. Most irrational impulses survive because they are not questioned. They rely on speed and familiarity. They appear so quickly that you assume they are natural truths. But speed is not proof of correctness. Habit is not proof of wisdom. Emotional force is not proof of accuracy. Only examination reveals whether something should be followed. You must train yourself to interrupt internal movement before it becomes external action. That interruption is where reason regains authority. Without it, you remain reactive. With it, you become deliberate. The pause between impulse and response is not emptiness. It is governance. It is where rational control becomes possible. Start observing how often you confuse urgency with importance. Many impulses feel urgent simply because they are emotionally charged. Anger demands immediate expression. Anxiety demands immediate avoidance. Desire demands immediate satisfaction. But urgency does not determine value. Reason must determine value. Without this correction, you will continue treating emotional intensity as guidance. Your mind will resist this discipline because it prefers immediate release. It wants to express, to react, to discharge internal pressure without delay. but every unexamined release strengthens the habit of impulsive living. Each time you obey without reflection, you reinforce the idea that reason is optional, and once reason becomes optional, impulse becomes dominant. To restore proper order, begin your mornings by affirming internal governance. Decide in advance that no impulse will act without examination. This does not mean suppression, it means evaluation. You are not rejecting emotion, you are refusing to let emotion decide without scrutiny. This shift alone begins to re-establish rational authority. Throughout the day, notice moments when internal reactions try to bypass reason. A critical comment triggers defensiveness. A delay triggers frustration. A challenge triggers avoidance. In each case, pause long enough to ask whether the reaction is justified or automatic. Most reactions lose power when exposed to awareness. You should also examine the language of your mind. Irrational impulses often disguise themselves as certainty. The mind says this must happen now. It says this is unacceptable. It says I cannot tolerate this. These statements feel decisive, but they are not rational conclusions. They are emotional exaggerations presented as facts. Reason must strip away this distortion. When you begin practicing this consistently, you will notice something important. Many impulses dissolve when they are not immediately acted upon. What felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What felt absolute becomes uncertain. What felt necessary becomes optional. This reveals that much of what you experience as internal pressure is temporary construction, not stable truth. Reason does not eliminate emotion. It places it in its proper position. Emotion becomes information rather than instruction. It signals internal states but does not dictate behavior. Fear can be observed without obeying it. Anger can be understood without expressing it. Desire can be acknowledged without acting on it. This separation restores clarity. You must also recognize how irrational impulses often arise from attachment to outcomes outside your control. When reality does not match expectation, the mind reacts emotionally, but reaction does not change reality. It only distorts your ability to respond effectively. Reason accepts what cannot be controlled and focuses only on what can be directed. Each evening, review where you allowed impulse to override reason. Identify moments where you acted before thinking. Identify where emotion replaced judgment. This reflection is not about blame. It is about training awareness. Without awareness, repetition continues. With awareness, correction becomes possible. You will notice over time that rational living feels less chaotic, not because life becomes easier, but because your responses become more stable. External events continue to change, but internal governance becomes consistent. This consistency is what creates strength. A mind that responds through reason is not easily destabilized by circumstance. There will still be impulses. They will not disappear, but their authority will weaken. They will appear as suggestions rather than commands. You will see them without immediately becoming them. This distance is the foundation of freedom. Without distance, you are absorbed by every internal movement. With distance, you can choose. You must also confront the fact that many of your past decisions were not guided by reason, but by unexamined impulse. This recognition is not meant to create regret. It is meant to create clarity about the necessity of change. You cannot correct what you refuse to acknowledge. Serving reason completely requires consistency, not occasional effort. It is not enough to act rationally when conditions are easy. The true discipline is maintaining reason when emotions are strong. That is where most people abandon governance and return to reaction. That is where transformation either continues or collapses. Begin now by treating reason as your internal authority rather than your internal advisor. It does not suggest, it directs. It does not negotiate with impulse. It evaluates it. It does not follow emotion. It examines it. This hierarchy must be restored for inner stability to exist. When reason governs, life becomes more deliberate. Not less emotional, but less chaotic. Actions become aligned with intention rather than reaction. Decisions become clearer because they are filtered through stability rather than fluctuation. And inner life becomes quieter because it is no longer constantly reacting to itself. No external force can restore this order for you. No environment can enforce it. No person can maintain it on your behalf. It is a continuous internal choice to prioritize clarity over impulse, examination over reaction, and truth over immediate satisfaction. Begin that choice now. Interrupt automatic reactions. Examine every impulse before obeying it. Return repeatedly to reason, even when emotion pulls you elsewhere. In doing so, you reclaim the highest form of discipline available to you, the ability to remain governed by thought rather than driven by impulse, and to live in alignment with what is clear rather than what is merely felt.